Recording in progress.
Greetings. I'm Tanya Morrow, the chair of the Rogue Valley Transportation District Board, and we're going to call the Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026 regular meeting of the board to order with a roll call, please.
Denise Kraus.
Here.
Bill Mansfield.
Here.
Tanya Morrow.
Here.
Tyler Jasper.
Here.
Katrina Erdman Newton.
Here.
Dan Davis and Carl McNair.
Here.
Thank you. We have before us the February 25th, 2026 regular board meeting minutes. And are there any comments, suggested corrections? I will say I really do appreciate that this has all been written up about all the things that we did. And, you know, it's a good record of what we did with the cuts. All right, seeing no comments or requests for corrections, we'll deem the minutes approved. Everybody's received the financial reports. Okay, everybody's got those. Record should reflect that. And now we'll move on to presentations. We have our financial report, and I think we got somebody on the Zoom for that. Yes. Hello.
Yes. Hi, I'm Matt.
Matt.
Philippi. I'm with Eisler Medford, and I had the pleasure of performing the audit last year with my other team members. I've been a CPA for over 20 years, and I started an audit, but this was my first governmental audit in probably 20 years, but this was a good one. So anyway, I'm not sure what I'm usually I share my screen. Is that correct? And I can walk you through the financials.
You could?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, a lot going on. It was, let's see here. And if I need to make it larger, please let me know. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have 100 and something pages here. So I'll just go through each section, and if anybody has questions, please stop and let me know. So the introductory section here, I'll just scan through that. I think you're probably all familiar with that. It appears, I think the one thing that should be highlighted here is the Certificate of Excellence. This says 2024, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
So, well done.
Right.
And then we'll go to the financial section here. And this is our auditor report. So essentially what we're saying is we've audited the financial statements as presented by management. And this is an unqualified opinion, meaning we agree with the amounts in the financial statements. We say there's nothing materially accurate. So you as a reader, if you're informed, the amounts are accurate and for an informed reader. So any questions here?
None.
Okay. Scrolling down. The management discussion analysis. This really just speaks to the financial statements and changes from the prior year. I won't highlight anything here. I'll just I have some observations in the actual financial statements themselves. So any questions in this section here? Actually, this is a good section right here. So the year-over-year changes. I don't think I have anything to point out here. There's more detail on the back, so keep going. Oh, okay. This section, I was going to highlight a couple things here. So there's two sections here on where, the funding comes from, the resources. So the first section is the bus fares, and then the transit, or I think it's, what is it, NEMT, the non-emergency transport medical. And I think that the increase is largely as a result of that, the NEMT, is that correct? I think. So that's a 10% increase. The revenues, and this is something that there's several different sources of income here, and some of them are probably pretty static from year to year. They increase, like property taxes. But then there's a couple of major ones that went down significantly. And I can only imagine that presented significant challenges in terms of budgeting and looking at resources. And I know that there was, looking back at third or fourth quarter of last year, there was some cuts and a lot of decisions made. So this is really eye-opening and to me. So any questions here? Good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Let's see here. Capital assets. So almost $39 million in assets at the end of the fiscal year, June 24, and then 44. And I think there's some completion of two major buildings, I think. And then I can't remember how many buses were purchased, but I think the buses were the other significant purchase expenditures. Any questions? No? Long-term debt, RVTD essentially has no debt, no bonds, no borrowing, except for, I think, a little bit that's borrowed through a state of Oregon that can be borrowed through the infrastructure bank. And then basic financial statements. I think we just looked at this information here. But in terms of financial resources, there's $9 million in cash. And then there's a footnote, there's some disclosures that explain what's in here. And then when I get to that, I'll explain that. The intergovernmental receivables is money owed from both the federal government and the state of Oregon, I believe. And then, as I said, down here below, RVTD has liabilities, but mostly just amounts we owe vendors and payroll-related expenditures, and then no real long-term borrowings. Any questions here?
Yeah, Matt, the accrued payroll liabilities, is that for like built up vacation time and things like that? No. Is that,
Yes.
What is that?
Well, the vacation time is, I believe it's compensated absences right here.
Okay.
And then off the top of my head, it's going to be, so it'll be a couple things. It'll be, I think, payroll for the end of December that, employees had earned, but we hadn't paid out, wages that were due in January for December. And then the payroll taxes associated with that. But the vacation is the compensated absences right here. So that's $1 million.
Okay.
213 and 855,000.
Thank you.
Okay. And then again, the revenues and the expenses. So up here, this is actually money we get, for the services that we actually provide locally. And then down here is the income, the different income sources. that aren't for the pay for services, mostly grants and taxes. And then separately spelled out are federal, state, and grants that we receive for capital purchases down here. So that was $6.4 million. Any questions there? Okay.
There's a loss on the sale of capital assets.
My favorite, the cash flow statement.
Oops, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
There, going back on to page 26, there is a loss on the sale of capital assets? Do we know what that is? Huh?
Yes, that's correct.
Just
think,
curious. It seems like an odd thing.
Debbie's coming up, so she can answer that.
The loss on
Okay.
the sale of capital assets was due mostly to the software program that was abandoned.
Okay,
So,
That's right.
because it
Yeah,
wouldn't work properly, so that's where that came from.
okay, thanks.
that's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Cash flow statement. I don't think I have. Oh, okay. Yeah, the big number here is the acquisition. So over $10 million in expenditures related to the buildings, the bus purchases, and other asset purchases. I would expect that this number will go down for this fiscal year. So some end of some major programs. Any questions? Okay. These are the notes here. So on the front of the financial statements, these are all summarized numbers. So back here, you can find a little more detail if you see a number on the balance sheet or the statement of revenues and expenditures. I would point out here. I think there's cash. Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, cash here. Make this a little bigger. So there's $9 million cash on hand at the end of June. And then about half of that, I think, is held with the state of Oregon in a program that they have.
Okay,
So, and then the other is just checking accounts.
that's our investment.
Well, it's the government.
LGIP,
Oh, okay.
Local Government Investment Pool.
Correct.
Which is where we gain our interest.
Yep. And then this is the cash separated by general and then the TransLink. So I think in accounting, we have to create the different funds and separate those and segregate those. Let's see here. Amounts owed to RVTD from the government. So most of it was amounts owed by the federal government. And then the state of Oregon. And I believe that we collected all of these shortly after the end of the fiscal year. Okay, let's see here. This is a useful schedule. So I think on the cash flow statement, it said there was $10 million in expenditures during the fiscal year. So this gives a better idea of where that money went. So I think that the new expenditures were mostly the buses and then finishing up the building projects.
So that was our match.
Right.
No, on the building?
No,
No. That
Yeah.
was including the grants.
So where it shows the addition here on buildings, the 16 million,
Yeah.
it includes a partial transfer from the construction in progress, which was booked the year before. So
Right.
that's 2 million, and then you add the other levels. So the 16 million wasn't all spent this year. Some of it was spent last year and sitting in construction in progress. And so
Right.
after the building's complete, I move it from construction in progress to buildings.
Right. So yeah, there was $15 million in construction in progress. And then during the fiscal year, we moved 14 million of that down to here. So maybe kind of 2.6 million in new expenditures for the buildings and during the fiscal year. Something like that. Okay. I think this is the question about the accrued vacation, so it's called compensated absences. So about 100 or $1 million in unused vacation time. And then as far as debt goes or loans, tiny loan that's almost paid off. So I would say essentially no debt. And
Debbie, is that one
That's a-
paid now?
It's
Yeah, that's a-
paid off now. Yeah, it was paid in October. So we're all done with that.
let's see here. Keep going. Supplementary, and so we're required to budget and report against our budget. So I think the big changes in terms of what the revenues and obviously these numbers, we budgeted 9.8 million for employee transit tax and ended up collecting 5.3 million, and then the federal and state grants were short by 14 million. Any questions here? That has to be hard when you budget and then all of a sudden it evaporates. So,
That's why we cut service.
yeah, I know. I can only imagine how hard that was, honestly. Really. Just unexpected.
I do have a question on those. So can you go back up to that? So we that's saying we budgeted 24 million and we received just under 10 million for federal and state grants.
Most of them are reimbursement grants, so if you don't spend the money, you're not going to get it. So that's
Okay.
kind of misleading because it pretty much means we received that much revenue less the, it paid for everything except for the match. So we weren't really $14 million shy in revenue that we spent. We were 14 million shy in finishing projects that we had budgeted for. Some of them just carried over into the next year. We had a lot of projects that we had in the budget that didn't get completed. So like, electric vans and, a bunch of high dollar amounts that carried on are still in our budget that won't get completed this year either. So they'll carry over to next year.
Okay, that makes sense. And it looks like the employee transit tax, though, that was significantly less, and that's not a reimbursement.
Well, the way the employee transit tax is, they pay you all the money up front, but you can't recognize the money as revenue unless you spent it. So what you're seeing here is the difference between what we budgeted we thought we would receive and what we thought we would spend versus what we actually spent. So it does probably mean we didn't get as much money as we thought we would get. Therefore, we didn't spend as much because we had to cut service. We didn't spend as much money as we had. But the thing about the transit tax is they're paying you up front, but it sits in deferred revenues until you actually spend it and report it as spend. And then it moves from deferred revenues into revenues. So it's not your money until you spend it, because you will have to pay it back if, you know, the rules say if you don't spend it in 2 bienniums, you have to give it back. Like, that's ever going to happen. But so technically speaking, that's kind of a thing where you don't spend it, it doesn't get recorded. But it's still down about 4 or 5% from what we expected. So part of that is money we expected to get and didn't get, but the rest of it is money we did not spend. We had no carryover. So we had zero transit tax left in our bank as of July 1. So all the rest of it is due to money we didn't get and we didn't spend.
Follow-up question on that. How do we predict what we're getting or know what we're getting, or do we just have to see what arrives?
We get an estimate from the state once or twice a year. And so when we go to do that biennium application for the STIP projects, we're told how much money we're going to get and how much we can actually put into our projects. And then sometimes they do this 130%. They want you to budget for more than you're getting because they think the money's going to go up. I don't think they're going to be doing that anymore. But so every 2 years, we do the STIP application. They tell us how much money we have allocated to us in the estimate. And then if they say do 130% of that, we do 130%. If not, we do what we're exactly getting. And so we have to portion it out between all of our projects. So they're giving us the estimate. They don't let us, use anything outside of the estimate.
That makes sense. Thank you. Just wanted to keep the process clear.
And I have a follow-up question too. So I thought I was tracking with the explanation until the end. So the 4 million less, that some of that was because of the service cuts. Is what I thought I was hearing, because we didn't spend that on the new routes.
I'll just add one thing.
Okay.
So you have to realize that we're doing this budget in May, right?
Uh-huh.
So in May, we're saying in May, we're predicting we're going to have so much carryover on the STIF money plus what we get. And so therefore, we're budgeting with that in mind. Plus, we were budgeting with what had historically happened, about a 3% increase in the STIF. Well, that didn't happen. It actually decreased by 4%. And then the service was way more expensive than we expected. Due to many reasons. And so therefore there was a couple combined items there as to why when it came right down to it at the end of the year, we had spent all of our STIF money because of the cuts in the STIF, and because at the end of the year we didn't have as much as we thought we were going to have carried over at the beginning of the year, because we have to estimate in May. And we never know because we haven't reported on that final quarter, and we haven't received that final payment from ODOT when we're doing that budget. So in some cases that causes the difference.
So it sounds like it's not a matter of not spending the money so much as that we actually got that much less.
For this year, yes. If you look at last year, though, last year we had carryover. The year before, not last year, but the year before that, we had some carryover. So it wasn't sitting in deferred revenue. You can see that on the financial statements last year, or for ending 2024, not last year, but the ending 2024, that we actually had some deferred revenue for the transit tax because we had money we had collected but hadn't spent. And we put that into this budget. And so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See here, this is the general fund, the expenses. I don't know if I have anything to add here. Any questions here? Okay. Let's see here. TransLink. Yes, okay. TransLink. So this seems to be growing. The budget was 9 million and we're so probably around 12% over at least. Any questions there?
Doesn't look like it.
This just talks about property taxes here. How much were levied, how much we collected, discounts. Same thing for the last 5 years. This is how much Jackson County has not collected, that if they do collect it, they'll remit to our VTD. This is just a summary of what we saw before. Okay, let's see here. Oh, this is always useful. I can't see my Zoom here. This is, okay, here we go. So just a 5-year trend of assets and liabilities. So at the end of 2021, we had $22 million in capital assets, and that's essentially doubled in the last 5 years. So, any questions here? Okay. It's charts. Again, just the revenue sources. Another 5-year trend, or sorry, 10-year, 5-year trend. Is that 5 or 10?
10.
Wow. I'll just stop here. So anyway, operating revenues 5 years ago, $7.6 million, all the way up till almost 13 million. So not quite doubling, but I think that's mostly the TransLink business, the non-emergency medical transport. And then property taxes should slightly grow from year to year. And then the transit tax, which Debbie just explained, I didn't really understand how that works, but so it sounds like it's expected it'll bounce all over the place.
Thank you.
Any questions here?
Yeah, when we show a $21 million operating loss, that doesn't mean our budget is actually having that loss, right? Because we get other revenues.
Yes,
Okay.
you're correct.
We do balance.
It does balance.
Right.
We don't have
Not,
big
I'm,
sales.
nice knowing you if it's not.
But I should point out at the budget basis on that year, we had about a $6 million loss. And then you go to the full accrual basis, it comes out to $383,000 gain, because the capital assets are recorded differently on the budget basis than they are on the full accrue basis. So it's kind of misleading, but.
The whole thing is, as Tanya says.
Couldn't have said it better, Tony. Thank.
I'm just glad my
I'm-
finances aren't this complicated.
Right. I'm glad Debbie understands.
I'm. Okay. Chart, let's see here.
This is all required stuff that we have to put in here if we want to actually submit a formal ACFR to GASB and GFOA and get that award. We have to provide all of the statistical section. They tell you exactly what they want to see in it. And if you don't put it in there, you get a little comment. You might still get the award, but you get a comment. So.
A gold star with an asterisk.
As a fan of charts, I'm into it. But, you know,
Yeah. Oh, boy, yeah. Wow.
If you're a visual person, it helps.
Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. This, I think,
what the heck happened between 2016 and 2017 to property tax levies and collections?
That was the year that we needed to renew our levy and it didn't.
That makes so much sense now. It was like, that
Yeah.
sure did like triple. Now it makes sense.
But we didn't have a levy before 16.
Yeah, we didn't have a levy. We
Yeah.
tried in 16 and failed.
Okay, that
So
makes,
16 we won, but
Was it
14.
14? Sorry.
14 is where we didn't,
okay.
or 15.
16 is when we got
Yeah,
it.
we did get it.
I'm just I was struck by how
this is
much.
interesting. This tells us who the biggest property taxes payers are in Jackson County.
Oh,
Which is that?
So it compares this last year to 10 years previous. So you can see who's growing.
The manor.
yeah, I believe that.
Wow.
You know, all these old people like myself.
There are 3 now. They were 4 the year before.
Yeah. Walmart.
Interesting.
I think this is United Airlines because they have, is this, do they
Yeah,
own
they're-
the rest?
They're moving up. They weren't even on this chart 10 years ago. So they just popped up on this the last couple years as in the
Oh.
top 20.
And this is real property tax, right?
Yeah,
Huh,
assessed value.
right.
Just
It's like
value.
whatever they have is more than Costco.
They probably have some tax things in there, it's based on, I think it's based on what we actually receive. I get this straight from the county, so.
Right. Yeah, it's. Okay. Wow. Number of employees for the last 10 years by department. No. Any questions here? Trying to think here.
These
Sorry, I
numbers
know
are
you
all
can't see 2025 here. There we go.
before the
There we go.
cuts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is before the cuts, right?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Okay.
We only have 33 coach operators right now.
Wow.
Sadness.
Let's see.
There's the buses.
Number of buses. I think we added some. Which are the ones we added here? Right here. So 47 vehicles, and then these were added during the fiscal year. 6.
Are our
Mhm.
senior buses from 2006 and 2009 still operational?
Those are, that's last year's report. Some of those we got rid of in this current year that were under. So that number will go down significantly.
Okay.
Some of them sit in contingency too. So
Cool.
Those 4 2009 diesel hybrids, we sold those. And a few more in another category. We sold those 2010s as well. So 7 buses I can think of right off the top of my head we no longer have.
Okay. This must be number of buses segmented by diesel versus CNG. Number of passenger vehicles.
That's the Valley Lift.
Those are the ADA vehicles.
Fare structure. Any questions here? No? Ridership. This is a lot of detail. It's amazing. Okay, ridership last 10 years. So number of service hours, I'm assuming that's a bus hour, is that correct? Would that be a good way to think of it? The number of hours a bus was in service?
Yes.
Okay.
Usually relates to revenue service hours, actual
Okay.
people riding the bus and paying, not necessarily like deadhead.
Okay. Average boardings per day, 3,200. Ridership. Okay. Let's see. See if I can get to the end here.
Hey, Matt, I do have a question on page 100 for you, which I think you just scrolled past. This question might actually be for staff. It's on that graph right there. That little red line shows the average fare per ride. And I thought for Valley Lift, it was even $4 for the fare. Is that not the case sometimes? How are we getting those fluctuating numbers in that red line?
So some of those rides are subsidized by other means.
Oh, okay.
So for instance, we have contracts with like DD, it's called DD 53 and Valley Lift Plus, which are 2 other types of rides we provide. The people riding the bus don't pay the fare. The fare comes from DD 53 and Valley Lift Plus from the state, from DHS. So they're included in the number of trips, but we're not collecting $4 per trip for those. So it skews the numbers a little bit.
Right, because this just shows what the passengers paid versus what was actually collected.
Okay, thank you.
Makes any sense, because we do get
does.
paid by the state, so, for those rides.
All right, thank you.
Contracted service, it comes under a different category, which means we can use it for matching federal funds rather than bus fares. So there's an advantage to keeping it separate.
Thanks.
And it, like, in the last 10 years, our average fare per ride has gone down quite a bit. Is that because we're seeing more subsidies for the transit? Yeah.
And less rides too, so, I mean, that's the other thing, that the state, it starts subsidizing quite a bit. So you're going to see, but it's still $4.
Okay, thanks.
Sometimes they have multiple programs that they also are being billed to. So that's the other thing, it gets split out. They may have 2 different funding sources along with, if they even have to pay a fee.
So this is just for Valley Lift on this page. Okay.
But you'll see the same thing with fixed route. There's a lot of different programs that actually purchase bus passes for people that use the service. So you'll see a reduced fare, and that's why you'll see that fluctuation in fare, because it's coming from another source.
Okay.
And what Debbie was trying to explain is that the fare box, when we collect those dollars cannot be used for match. So they can go into our coffer, general fund, but we can't use it to match our federal funding. But if it comes from another program, it can be used for match. So that's why there's a separation. But it's very complicated. But if you also look at the cost of Valley Lift, it's going up. So when you see a ride cost $62.29, the one thing that to know is that the fare subsidy on some of these programs, they're actually paying for the cost of that ride versus the fare,
Oh, wow.
They're not paying that much, though.
but not that much. But they pay a certain amount.
Okay.
Thank you. We'd like them to pay the full amount,
That'd be,
and we're trying to get them to pay the full amount.
Just a number higher than 36 would be a start.
There's a match on those. I mean, they call it contracted services, but we still have to match it. So we still only get paid at, like Tim said, it's his program, 36% of the total cost of the ride.
Okay.
Okay. That just tells us what that percentage is, and that's what we use for the map. The governmental standard section, so
Almost to the end.
almost to the end, yeah, let's see here. We have several different reports here. I'll make sure I get. Sure I know what I'm. Sorry. Okay, so another report where okay, so we have to prepare a report on internal controls. And we had one finding and a recommendation regarding the bank accounts and something called the cash reconciliation process. And other than that, no recommendations, or most importantly, no material weaknesses found. So any questions here? Okay. I think this is our report on what we call single audit, where we review the expenditures in compliance with the major programs. So no findings here. Any questions? Okay. All of the programs we took a look at. As I mentioned before, one recommendation that we made around the bank process, but no significant or material weaknesses. And I think that's it. Wait, so as part of the Oregon, state of Oregon requires us to look at certain things around the way the budget process works, depositing. I think we've mentioned there's cash held with the state of Oregon. And so we found everything in compliance there. Insurance and fidelity bonds. So this is very specific to Oregon law. So everything in compliance there. Any questions? And that's it.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good evening.
All
I said, and
right.
have a good evening.
Good one.
All right. Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
And by the way, good job, Debbie. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
well done. All right. So, all right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay.
You too.
Good night.
All right. We have a public hearing on our recommendation on our 5310 funding awards. So I will ask staff before we get a presentation. Do we have anybody online? Okay. So we'll call the hearing to order though here. Go ahead, Paige, and tell us about our 5310 funding awards.
Okay, happy to. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paige West. I'm the Planning and Strategic Programs Manager. We are the lead agency and primary recipient of these funds that are 5310 funds. They are for older adults and people with disabilities, services and programs, primarily across the nation for services such as our Valley Lift, ADA paratransit type of service. However, they can also support mobility management activities, and they can also even support the purchase of vehicles. As the lead agency for our county, we are responsible for conducting a solicitation. This basically allows for other providers that either operate services or programs to be able to also receive these funds. And we conducted that solicitation in March and concluded it earlier this month in April. The Accessible Transportation Work Group, who we call AWG, that's an advising and recommending body to the Board of Directors. They are required to review and score and recommend the awards as part of the process. And they met just last week. We only had one other applicant besides Rogue Valley Transportation District, which is United Way of Jackson County. They have been receiving the 5310 funds for mobility management program, which is a staff support over at United Way for about 6 years now. And so they are requesting to receive additional funds for this upcoming biennium. A quick note on these funds and other funds that you're going to be hearing about later on in the meeting. ODOT has been going through an overhaul process with their schedule for solicitations, not only for this type of funding, but funding that we would actually receive through a competitive process through all throughout the entire state. What they're trying to do is stagger the bienniums and stagger the grants. There's several different grants that ODOT manages and administers, and they have decided to do sort of a gap year for some of our funds, and then also have funds that are, although they're not even eligible until October 1st of 2027, for example, starting the solicitation early. And so the funds that you are learning about this evening and the recommendations that we have are for funds that are not even available until October 1st of 2027. And those are good through September 30th of 2029. Again, this is a process that ODOT is going through, sort of a reconciliation to try and make their jobs a little bit more manageable, although it did make ours a little bit more complicated and challenging because they all sort of came at once in the last 45 days. So we've met all of our obligations for these funds, and we are going to be receiving the STBG, which is Surface Transportation Block Grant funds. Those can be used for a lot of different purposes, including highways and bridges and roads. But ODOT has flexed over $1,264,000 for our area, for the RVTD area, to be used for specifically older adults and people with disability services. And then we also received something called 5310 Small Urban Funds. Those are unchanged funds that come from Federal Transit Administration. They are allocated out of FTA as 5310 funds for specifically small urban areas, and that's what our classification is here at RVTD. And those funds are just shy of $845,000 for the biennium. New this year is something called 5310 Rural Funds. Every biennium up until now, ODOT has done a competitive statewide solicitation for, you guess it, rural transportation providers. We are not rural. And in fact, there's really no, in their way of defining what a rural area is, has to be an unincorporated area that's outside of the Medford UZA. There are very few of those territories within our district. You have to be less than 50,000 in population, and these have typically been given to places such as Curry County, areas within even, Klamath Falls or Klamath County. We received these funds as part of our solicitation, 112,000. However, in our research and deliberation with the ODOT staff, we have simply found that there is no one who can use these funds. And that includes United Way of Jackson County. We offered it to them as well. Again, you have to provide service for older adults and people with disabilities, transportation service. And again, there's no one in our county that does that. So unfortunately, we are going to turn these funds back, which I think sends a message to ODOT, because I think that they probably want to rethink the way that they are distributing these funds around the state. They really should be dedicated towards transportation services in rural areas. And that we have so many of those areas within the state of Oregon that could use these funds. And so I think they're going to find that there are many of our sort of larger metropolitan areas, such as ours, that are actually returning these funds to them. So that'll be hopefully a modification. So we are leaving those on the table, so to speak, that 112,000. The total funding available is $2,220,984. That does require 20% match, which we, both United Way of Jackson County and RVTD have. And it's a little bit of a boost, even if you take out the rural funds. It's about $275,000 more than we received in the current biennium, which is the 25-27 biennium. So we're getting a little bit more, which is great, that we'll be able to put that towards our Valley Lift service. So the Accessible Transportation Work Group did meet, and they made a recommendation for the board to consider awarding RVTD $1,203,272 in the 5310 STBG funds and $844,723 in the small urban funds. And then for United Way, $60,913 in the 5310 STBG funds. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation and answer any questions before our public hearing.
Go ahead. Carl's got one.
Hi, Paige. Thanks for your presentation. Can you just explain what United Way actually uses those funds or plans to use those funds for?
Yeah, absolutely. So mobility management, it's a term that a lot of us in the industry understand. Essentially, it's to provide travel training services, much like what RVTD does. We have a very robust travel training program here at RVTD. United Way also does travel training. They also coordinate with our human service agencies across the service area to make sure that the call takers and client customer service understands the transportation options that are available in our valley. We actually do that as well. They do work with employers a little bit to network with them, and simply United Way's umbrella of services and the different committees and programs that they have reaches much further than RVTD. And so they do have a footprint. It's a small footprint. I mean, $61,000 or over 2 years. It's not a tremendous amount, right, of programming, but it's enough so that they do have a small footprint within our community to provide and sort of further knowledge, education, networking, trying to fill gaps in services, build capacity, even encouraging other organizations to take our transportation services to their clients by hoping to fill gaps in transportation that's currently here. It's very difficult actually to evaluate and measure the types of service that they do, but it's much like preventive medicine. It's really difficult to put your finger on, like how many heart attacks or how many, cancers or diabetes did we prevent through preventive medicine? And so it's kind of in that same, we're trying to further both RVTD and United Way understanding and fostering more capacity around alternative transportation.
Okay.
And directed for, older adults and people with disabilities specifically.
So that money's paying for part of a staff position probably to do that type of work that you explained.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And the individual is Dahlia, and she's been working at United Way now for, I think about 4 years. And so she's, very experienced and knowledgeable in what she does. And you're right, it's just a portion of her staff time.
Great, thank you.
Page. All right, any other questions? I will call to see if, we don't have anybody from the public in the audience either. So I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I guess we'll move on to new business. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the recommendations of the Accessible Working Group for the 5310 funds?
Move approval.
Okay,
Seconded.
thank you. Any further deliberation?
No, thank you.
Okay, I think we're in good hands here. We'll go ahead and do a roll call if you don't mind, Loom. Just because that's what we. Yeah, she left.
Yes.
Yes.
Tyler Jasper,
Yes.
Katrina Ernman Newton,
Yes?
Dan Davis. Oh, I'm sorry, he's not here. Carl McNair.
Yes.
We have 5 yes votes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we also have a budget committee member nominee. I can't, there's a little confused whether it's Caitlin or Caden.
We were a little confused too.
All right, well,
I think it's Caden. I
Caden?
Because she emailed me again today.
Okay.
It was Caden.
all right, well, we have Miss Valenzuela, who's applied, and I guess you've got as much information as anybody here, right? Okay. Do we have any questions, comments, or would anybody like to make a motion to appoint Hayden?
She appears eminently qualified. I'd move approval.
Awesome. Thank you.
Seconded.
Okay. All right. We'll just do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Sorry. No, none opposed. Thank you. All right, moving on to reports.
Well, I don't have a lot to report. It seems like I should, but I think everybody's been very, very busy. I can tell you that we were in the Pear Blossom Parade, and that it was very successful. The children were very happy this year because we handed out candy. In the years past, they had said no candy, and so they did it anyway.
About it this time.
This time they said, okay, you can pass out candy. So we did pass out some candy to the children along the parade route, but it was very successful, although we got through the parade and then there was a downpour. So unfortunately, our tent down at the Pear Blossom Pavilion, where everybody was located, they got drenched. And so
It didn't fly away, though. We had a couple of folks down there that they're.
yeah, it didn't fly away, but there was pretty much a downpour. I think we were lucky because the van was close, so we could, I should say because I was in bed sick and the employees were actually doing it. So to Adam and Mike and Sean, thank you very much for your hard work during that time. And I think there was other people that helped out, Randy and Nick. So thank you so much for showing up and helping the staff. So the other thing I wanted to let you know was that the governor should be announcing her rebuilding our transportation vision work group. They were supposed to come out the 20th. We haven't heard yet. I can tell you that I am on the vision group as the OTC chair and also serving on one of the sub-work groups, which is the transit piece. And we'll be starting that process starting May 1st. So I can say that Grace Krinikin, who is one of the co-chairs, is really working this issue hard. She has been very, very busy working with legislators and others to get this together. So I will try to send out the information as soon as I hear it so that you can also join in. They are going to be public meetings, so I'm not sure that you can actually participate, but you can actually tune in and hear what's going on. It sounds like they're going to meet at least monthly, if not more. I think it's going to be more, quite frankly, because I don't see, there's so much work to do. I don't see how we can do it in less than a month, once a month meeting.
On the work group, are you wearing your OTA hat or your RVTB hat or your OTC hat?
My OTC hat.
Okay.
But really, I'm not, and actually all three, because what they're doing is looking for transportation experts that fit a whole bunch of different molds. And so and also the CTA hat. I mean, so we kind of I fit in a lot of the different pieces, but it's really multimodal is where they're looking for my expertise. I'm looking forward to serving on it, I think. I think it's a great opportunity and I feel very honored to be asked, but it's going to be a yeoman's work to get this all done and to get everybody on the same page at some point. And then the subgroups are going to be meeting outside of that too and making recommendations to the visioning group. So there's a lot of moving pieces and I think they've had a really difficult time just staffing up everything, but it sounds like they're really, really close. Go ahead, Carl.
I just wanted to ask Julie for a picture with all your hats.
Yeah.
Would you like me to wear all those hats? Okay, actually, you'd be surprised how many of those hats I do have.
I'm sure
I
you,
mean, they're true hats, so I'll try to get a picture. That would be pretty comical. And I could just,
Hat rack for them, like, behold my hats. These are all
Yes.
the hats I wear as I am called upon to do.
I prefer the boots personally. Yes, I have boots for each occasion, so who I'm going to use the boots on. But with that said, the Oregon Transit Association did have a retreat a couple weeks ago, and I did attend that. And they are gearing up to look at how we're going to get transit agencies working this summer to make sure that the groundwork is done, that everybody is on the same page, that we're firing on all the cylinders and making sure, I'm using bus lingo, but making sure that everybody is really committed to this and providing the information that needs to be provided. And I think that was one of the things during 2025 that was very, very difficult, was that we were being asked by so many different, there was 4 transportation committees at the legislative level, and they were all asking for something different. So you were constantly trying to grind through a lot of data and get information back to them quickly, and they usually wanted it within 2 or 3 days. So the poor transit agencies were just not prepared, especially the smaller guys. I think that what we've tried to do at the Oregon Transit Association level on the board of directors is getting people prepared now, making sure that all the information is the same, that we can pull it together and give it to whoever's asking for it in a really quick manner. So more to come with that. But I think everybody is really on board because there isn't a transit agency in the state right now that isn't starting their cutting process. When we talked about the STIF dollars and the decrease in payroll, with unemployment being as high as it is in Oregon, all of a sudden the transit agencies that have no other revenue, we're lucky we have that 3-legged stool. A lot of them don't. They have a 2-legged stool, and what they're seeing is they just can't maintain the level of service that they need to do. So we're not alone now. They finally caught up with us. So the voice is loud and clear coming from the users of the system. And I think that's the other thing. We're having an open house tomorrow night Am I correct? I want to make sure I'm on the right calendar. Tomorrow night over at the Guy Wallman Training Center, it starts at 5 to 6:30. Thank you, Adam. And, you know, we're there to hear from the passengers and from the community. Come out and talk to us and tell us how things are not working for you or what you'd like to see come in the future or what is working. I mean, I think that that's important to us too. I know this week I've wrote a couple of the routes that employees have reported that are too tight, that we're having a hard time maintaining the service levels on, just to see what's going on in our community with construction and other things that may delay us in being able to make that system. And when you have a route system that is as compact as it is now and not running later in the evening, it doesn't give people opportunities so that if they miss a bus, what they're going to do. So we're looking at all of those pieces and we really want to hear from the public what's going on. So I think a lot of times people throw up their hands and say, well, you don't really care. It doesn't matter. My voice doesn't matter. It does. It really does, and we do want to hear from you. So tomorrow evening, again, it's here at the down at the transfer station at the Guy Wallman Training Center from 5 to 6:30, and I will be there along with staff to do some surveying and also just have a conversation with people. And then I wanted to flag for the board members, we are trying to put together a budget, but a lot of the unknown, there's two things going on simultaneously that is preventing us from starting our budget process. One is our union negotiations, and then the other one is the levy. So we're waiting to find out from May 19th what happens with our levy. We do have two different budgets that we've put together. We're not sure, and we're tweaking them constantly, trying to figure out, you know, what's going to work best. But we would like you to reserve June 3rd as our first budget meeting.
June 3rd.
June 3rd at 5 o'clock, Debbie, is that correct? 5 o'clock? 5:30. 5:30, sorry.
5:30, it's a Wednesday.
So that will be the first budget meeting.
And then we usually try to adopt in June.
We have to adopt in June.
So
So we're hoping after that meeting, we'll know how many more we're going to need.
All right.
And then set those at the June 3rd meetings.
Just the one, yeah,
I
okay,
think we went to 2 one year.
yeah.
1 year we had 2 and then, but I don't know.
I know
So-
I asked a lot of pesky questions on the budget committee before I was here, but we still got it done in one.
Yep. And you know, I think that as tight as our budget is, there's not going to be a lot of difference other than you'll see when we run the numbers, how it's put together. And, you know, it's unfortunate the way we are. I know that I got a text last week from our public affairs people in Salem saying, hey, are you paying attention to what's happening at the federal level? Because there was in the president's budget, there was a 23% reduction in capital, not in operating, but in capital, where a lot of the grants that actually have been already allocated out are going to be pulled back. So we're waiting to hear on that. We have a few, and they have to do with our Valley Lift service and those electric vehicles. They may get clawed back. We don't know, but we'll wait and see.
Was it an earmark though?
So one is, but one is through the state and also some state money and federal money kind of together. So it may be reduced a little bit. But again, we're doing the best we can. I mean, the budget is, again, you're guessing, you're estimating what your carryover is, what you think your future funding is going to be, and then, you know, then the reality hits. The other piece is the reauthorization, the transportation bill. You know, I've heard they were going to try to get it done this year. It doesn't sound like it's going to happen till after the election, so it won't be until next year, which means there's going to be kind of a delay probably in our federal funds again. So we're just watching that really closely, making sure that we have enough in our cash flow to be able to sustain ourselves until we get those authorized. But we'll keep you informed about that. And I think that's all I had, unless there was anything I forgot. I'm looking at the staff right now of where we need to be. We're getting really close with our CCOs and looking at our NEMT and our contracts there, and we have 2 CCOs left. We had sent a letter to cut our contract with one because we couldn't come to an agreement, but it looks like we have an agreement now. So we're doing good. So we'll be signing that contract very soon.
When do you go back to the bargaining table?
So the union will be meeting this weekend to talk about our negotiations. It has not been going well. I'll just tell you that. So the getting my union contract in one day dissolved. So we've already had 2 meetings. So we've been into this for 4 days now, and we're still far apart. So we'll see where it goes.
One last question. So the transit agencies are now unified. They've got a stronger voice. Do you think that was really what was the problem, that it was missing? Okay.
No, I don't think it was the part that was missing, because the transit piece, other than we kept getting reduced, and then to a sunset. I think that was just, we were a bargaining chip in the ODOT
Yeah, I mean,
world.
the opposition wanted to move all that money to maintenance.
Right,
So
right.
all of the money.
All the money, yes, including what we get now.
Right.
And so, again, we were just a pawn in the game, but it didn't help
Right.
because there was a lot of frustration. So the frustration that we saw in 25 and even in 26 was that there's a few of us that were doing all the heavy lifting. And, one of the things that I said to at our retreat was, look, guys, I know you always depend on, certain players to do the heavy lifting, including Rogue Valley Transportation District. You have to come to the table and you have to participate, because we can't always be the voice. And so there was a real understanding moment for LTD, Salem. So Salem and RVTD were really doing the heavy lift for TriMet and LTD. And we just really made it clear that we can't keep doing this. It doesn't work that way. You have to have the small guys at the table, because you know what? There's a lot of legislators out from rural areas. We need those rural areas to really stand up and make their voice heard. And so that's the piece I think that is really important. If we're missing anything, it's on the Republican side of the vote. In rural areas, and even in our own community with rural legislators, understanding the importance of transit, that it does impact their community, that people do matter, their voters matter. And so I think we're getting there.
You got progress. Good. All right. Any questions before we move on to the presentation from planning? Is that Paige? Here she is again. Go ahead, Paige.
Okay, thank you. I don't have a presentation. I am going to share the memo, though, that was in your packet. So again, our Oregon Department of Transportation partners, they've been busy with doing several grant solicitations, and these are very typical funds for them also, just like the 5310 funds. But it's, again, looking at something that's going to be happening in the 27-29 biennium. There's 2 different buckets of funding. One's called Small Urban Competitive Transit Grant Funds, and then the second one is called Statewide Competitive Transit Grant Funds. Same cycle. They quickly came out in late February and gave us about 45 days for us to turn around what's called an initial application. That is new for ODOT. Usually they just have us submit an application and that's it. But this time they are requiring for all of these funds, for these 2 funds, the initial application probably to be able to provide some feedback and maybe get an idea sort of how many players are at the table. The Small Urban Competitive Transit Grant is a very promising one, partly because only small urban transit agencies, and there's 7 that are within the state, are even eligible to receive those funds. And they have to be used for capital projects, so buses primarily. You could do a construction project such as, improving or renovating a building or something, but it can only be used for capital. So this is a very competitive one for us in terms of being able to probably say, yeah, we might actually get something out of this one. There's $3.5 million that are available with this grant. The second one is not the same. The statewide competitive transit grant, everyone from TriMet down to our rural partners in Curry County are eligible to receive those funds. And it is for not only capital projects such as buses and facilities, but also operations. And so with this one, there's $21.6 million that are available statewide, and everyone is allowed to submit a project. So the chances of receiving funds out of this one, in my opinion, are pretty low. But the first one, I think we actually have a decent chance. So we typically bring these to the board in advance of submitting the application, but the deadline for the initial application hit just within the last couple of weeks for both of these. There is a final application that is due in May. So we do have the ability to revoke our application or move forward. And I think the levy and what happens with the levy is going to play a significant part in that decision making. But in order for us to be competitive and eligible to receive funds, we had to submit an initial application. So those have already been submitted. And basically what this memo is providing you is what the projects were for. So for the Small Urban Competitive Transit Grant, we have submitted 2 applications. One is for what we're calling the low emission bus refurbishment, and the second one is for the low emission bus replacement. And the refurbishment is very much what it sounds like, but it's new for something that RVTD has done. Usually we go for new buses off the manufacturing line. They drive up on our property. They're like brand new cars. We're doing something a little bit different with this one. There is a company called Complete Coachworks. They're known nationwide, and I think that they have built a very strong business for themselves over the last 15 years, where they take used buses that are in good shape pretty much still, but they refurbish them and essentially make them very, very much like a new bus. The cost difference is pretty significant. It's about half of buying a new bus. So this project is to refurbish 3 of the 2015 CNG buses. And you can see the cost information there of what that would be. The second one is to do an actual bus purchase where we would purchase 2 new buses, but they would be CNG buses and replacing 2015 diesel buses. The application itself is more competitive because it's going to a lower emission fuel source. Oregon Department of Transportation and the state of Oregon does have more awards, and there is more competitive applications if you are reducing emissions. And so this one is to actually replace the diesel buses. What's weird about this process is if we don't receive these funds in the first round, they automatically get submitted, which is great for me. Automatically get submitted into the second round, which is the statewide competitive transit grant, the one that is probably not likely for us to get funds from. So you can see in that second category, those 2 will just move forward and transition into the statewide competitive transit grant. if neither one of them are awarded, and if we don't revoke those applications, I should say. However, because the second bucket of funds is also for operations, not just capital, we also submitted an application for restoring the Route 30 to Jacksonville. And this is a project that would only be for 1 year. You might recall I was saying that ODOT is reconfiguring a lot of their solicitations, and that one of the things that they're trying to do is provide this bridge funding for 1 year for this particular solicitation, which is for stiff discretionary operating intercity funds. That was a mouthful, but basically we're on a cycle right now that would be ending in 27, and they're trying to extend that for 1 more year to 28 so that they can start the next biennium. And so it's really only good for 1 year. And so the project that we submitted is only for the 27-28 fiscal year. So we don't need to worry about, in terms of our budget that Julie was just talking about, the one that we are reviewing upcoming here this spring, early summer. None of these projects are going to start until July 1st of 2027. But this one particular one for the Route 30, it would restore the Route 30 service and support the operations for that route in a slightly modified Route 30 that we've, I think, discussed with the board, where it would run 6 trips per day. And so the project cost, again, is displayed here and on your memo. So our intention was to make sure that we at least have a chance to be able to be eligible for these funds. However, we do understand that there are a lot of ways to either make these worthwhile for us to submit in May or possibly not. And we can have those discussions, in May at our May meeting, once we know what happens with the levy. Both of these final applications are due after the next May meeting. And so between now and then, a lot's going to be known. A lot of our decision-making, I think, is going to be dependent on what happens with the levy. So I'll conclude with that. Sorry, I know it's a lot. It's been a lot for me in these past few weeks too.
I think there was a typo in this page. On the second piece, it was project will restore limited service on the Route 30 between Medford, and it's supposed to say and Jacksonville
Oh, you're
instead of
correct.
Ashland.
Sorry
So,
about that.
The other thing I wanted to just talk to the board about on these applications, and thank you, Paige, for trying. I mean, she had a very small window to submit this stuff. Why are we not trying to go for hybrid diesel? And the reason, and I'll give you a reason, is that we're not having very good luck with our hybrid diesel. We are really concerned about the product right now. It's still under warranty, but every fix is over $50,000.
Goodness.
And the warranty will be running out this November, and we're concerned about buying them. Now, the next generations might be better. We don't know. I mean, they're trying to fix this stuff as they go along. But one of our thought process was we can't afford hybrid diesel right now just because of that issue. Now, CNG was we had the same issues with CNG back in the day when they started making CNG vehicles. Then all of a sudden we had to, within a year, replace every single engine in our CNG fleet. And we had bought 11 buses. So it's improved and it got better and better. So I had told them when the staff talked, the direction I gave them was go for CNG refurbish at this point. We can talk about it with the board, let them think about it. We can always pull the application if the board doesn't agree to it. But we felt like we needed a placeholder there. And we didn't put in for the hybrid diesel just because of that. And electric, the state is pushing back on are they still pushing back on the electric vehicles? Because
Many are not.
they're pushing back right now because of the same technical problem that they're having with the hybrid
The high cost of repair and all that.
and not even getting them out.
Oh, just not having them be received.
So I know that right now Salem's really frustrated because they bought some and I think it was Salem or LTD, and the charging isn't working. So
Oh.
they were doing the redundant charging on route and it's not working. So they've got a bunch of electric vehicles sitting again.
I like the refurbish idea. How are we feeling about that product? Or have they been doing it for a while or, okay.
They've been doing it for a while. And so I feel pretty good about that. And again, it's a proven like product now. We know it's really low cost in replacement. But again, the board had given us direction that they didn't want us to buy any more CNG vehicles. This is a refurbish of something we already had. So just wanted to point that out to think about as part of the discussion.
We're still buying renewable
Yes,
methane, aren't we?
we are. And we're still working on that other piece of it too.
Oh, yeah. I guess I had one other question. Oh, the only other thought I had was, I mean, this is our initial application, so we'll go forward with this, but is if we, the federal budget gets cut, if there was an opportunity here at all to like make up, because that's a capital.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the other part is the 23% reduction when we look at it might be one or two vans. So we can do the tweaking there, I think. I think we'll be okay.
I just have one additional question. This is more for Paige. I noticed that the final applications, it says here, are due on May 29th, and any discussion would happen on May 27th. That seems awfully tight to me. Is there a typo there, or are?
That's correct. Yes. So yes, one of them is due. The small urban one is due on May 29th. It's a very simple process to submit them. Because
Assuming there
this
aren't
is-
like changes, right?
we're not allowed to make any changes, are we? I mean, this is the initial application is sort
I
of what
don't know. This is the first time that ODOT has required an initial application. Typically, when I've had to do an initial application before, there are not significant changes or differences, I should say, between the one that you submitted initially to the final application. I'm not even sure if I will have to submit an application, to be honest. So those details have yet to be revealed to us by ODOT, but I'm not worried about it. If we determine that we want to continue and submit a final application, we'll make sure that we get it turned in on time. The other application, the more competitive, the statewide one, that one we have a little more leeway, a couple weeks. That one's due on June 15th.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm because I was like, that's, I don't know what day of the week that is, but I know it's right around a holiday weekend and different things going on. So like, checking in.
Correct, yes. And
Memorial
also we will be bringing to the board at the May meeting, essentially a resolution that is committing the match that is required for both of these grants, so that we can submit those with the grant. And so we will bring them to the May meeting, but if we decide perhaps the levy has not passed, we want to take a different course, or, I mean, both of these ideas about a refurbishment, which is the lowest cost option for us to get what Nick calls fresh blood in our fleet, it is paramount that we have new buses coming in on a fairly, staggered timeline, between 3 to 5 years. If we don't receive these funds, or if we opt to not submit, I do want to make sure the board understands that our next opportunity with the Oregon Department of Transportation wouldn't be until 2031 because of the way that they're staggering these grants. I think that when we approached this and looked at what is our best option, whether the levy passes or does not pass, we feel like it's still important for us to submit these applications because it provides us with replacement buses for the 2015 CNG buses and the 2 diesel 2015 buses. They are past their useful life as of 2027. And we won't even see these funds until 2029 or 2030 if we get these funds, which means that they would be 14 or 15 years old at that time. And again, we won't see another opportunity with ODOT until 2031. And so our fleet will be aging very quickly. So even if we don't receive the levy, we still feel like this is a very strategic course of action with the way that we have set up these grants. And then, of course, with the Route 30, that one is, if we're able to receive those funds, that is going to offset any of our general funds that we would have had to invest in that service anyway. Because our intention is to restore the Route 30 because they are within our district and they have the, we have the legal obligation to provide them with some level of service. And so again, strategically, when looking at this, we thought, well, let's go ahead and apply for a route that we know that we're going to need to, restore regardless of what happens with the levy. So I think our staff recommendation in May, regardless of what happens with the levy, is that we move forward and submit these.
Another quick question. How long do you expect the refurbished to last? What's the lifespan?
I don't have the answer to that. I'm not sure if Nick does. 'Cause this is
He
sort of
just
new
did.
for us.
You
Okay.
said 6 to 10.
6 to 10 years.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I just had a comment on like electric or the hybrid buses. We got some hybrid ones, but we were talking about electric, and I had a chance to meet with a friend who works at TriMet last week and talk to him, and not about transit business, just catching up. And he was telling me how much trouble they're having with their electric fleet and how much more it's costing them to operate. And so I think I'm glad we're still running our reliable CNG buses.
On renewable gas.
It'll get there, I think it's just like if you think about vehicles, it gets there eventually. It's just that it's just working the bugs out. And I think that fortunately what happened was federal government threw a lot of money into electrification early on versus trying to do these pilots and get this stuff going. They just went all in. And I think that was the mistake they made. Where it'll get there eventually. Or something different will come along.
Solid state hydrogen or something like that. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. All
I'm not
right.
sure I want to be early adopters on solid state hydrogen buses. Just gonna put that out there.
Oh, I have to wait another 10 years.
I want to watch some other places do the pilot on that.
All right. General comments or questions from the board? All right.
I do have one, actually. I had a conversation with Councilor Whitaker at Central Points last month. Kelly and I were there and we were talking to him. And he had a couple of interesting points, one of which I wanted to bring to the board and get y'all's feedback as well as from staff. One thing that he mentioned regarding concerns with Costa Valley Lift was he mentioned he had constituents who would have a treatment plan that required a lot of medical appointments within a relatively brief period, and they'd have to do basically a $4 transaction every single ride, and as a result would have to go, gosh, I don't have that much money this month. I have to decide which appointments I skip and which ones I don't. And it made me think about how our bus fare is structured such that you don't have to pay for a single ride every time. We offer a few different ways. You can get a 10 ride pass, a 20 ride pass, a month ride pass. I was curious if there's any way we might be able to do something like that for a Valley Lift, so that if somebody does know that they're going to have 10 rides that they're definitely going to use in a short period, if we can give them even a 10% discount akin to what we do for our 20 ride bus pass users.
So because of the cost, we haven't in the past. There has been conversations over the years of trying to reduce that. And the cost is just so high to the service. I don't know how we do it. I mean, you have to do it for everyone. So it gets, so right now in the Valley Lift, they can load a card
Oh, they
where their
can.
fare
Okay.
is on there, but it's still no discount. It doesn't give them a discount. But if somebody wanted to donate, like the city of Central Point or even Ashland does this, where they have donated through the senior center to seniors to supplement, that's a possibility. I mean, they can run a program where they do that for the people that live in their communities. And, I'm always open to having that conversation with them. But it's hard. It's a really hard thing because if you think about it, it's door-to-door service or curb-to-curb service for somebody, and yet it's your most vulnerable population. The people that are in the Valley Lift program that are on Medicaid have options. The ones that are on Medicare are the ones that don't have options, which means that they have a higher income level than somebody that doesn't. And that, I think, is the part that's hard sometimes, is that they would like to see the same thing happen for themselves as you see for the Medicaid clients. But unfortunately, Medicare doesn't care. How's that? So, but, we're always willing to work with any jurisdiction if they want to put a program together of trying to figure out how to do that, we can.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts from board members?
Just that seems like a real opportunity for improvements for healthcare, and and a real argument for why transit needs to be in the conversation in a lot of arenas. The fact that there's such a difference between Medicaid and Medicare patients is really striking to me, and okay, what could go there? What would actually make a difference for the person who needs these rides right away? And I'm wondering how that could be accomplished and what would be meaningful and impactful at the point of need. Like, is there a way for Medicare as a function to have access to additional supports when a patient is in an aggressive treatment plan and needs more support for a known duration? Like, I know that, but I'd love for that to be something that happens.
The dialysis unit, they have worked in the past to pay that extra help through their, I think they have a trust is what they were using to make up the difference. And the same thing could happen to your cancer treatment or other treatments. So if it is something that is,
or I'm thinking like even prenatal or postnatal, kind of when you have periods of higher frequency visits and higher transportation needs. I think it would be really impactful for a trust or other kind of organization, some kind of funder to step in there and help to provide that support. There's an opportunity there.
there is. So, and especially with what's really nice now with Valley Lift is they are on the same kind of electronic fare box that the buses are on, and clients actually have an account. So I know that there were people that were living in Eagle Point that were using the system, and there was actually, I think it was the Commission for the Blind was actually loading their card with fare so that they could go more frequent to different things. So there's opportunity there, I think, with electronic fare box to be able to do stuff like this. And we're always willing to have that conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate all the input.
All right, we move on to,
Oh,
go ahead.
I had another
Mhm.
thing involving our levy. So just wanted to put a plug out there for the big drop, Take a Walk for Transit on May 1st weekend. I know staff can't promote this, but I believe we can as board members. So the Rogue Valley Transit Now group is trying to recruit as many people as possible to basically get the word out on May Day weekend to reach as many voters as we can. So you can look at rvtransitnow.org for more information. But I wanted to make sure we're all aware of it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have an RVCOG report?
Yes, the Rogue Valley Council of Governments. Am I,
You're good.
is it sounding all right?
Yeah.
It sounds,
Yeah.
sounds strange to me. Strange to me. The budget committee met for 3 hours and
Oh, no.
and the board met for an hour and a half. So I'm getting lots of hours in meetings today, but that's not your problem. The most interesting part of the meeting was a presentation by a planner for Rogue Valley Council of Governments who talked about TIP. I realized Transportation Improvement Program. I realized some of you know a lot about it. I didn't, so I learned some things about how various local projects are improved and funded and the process for them. It was a very interesting thing. I asked whether or not the state limitation of the fact that we're hung up on money from the state is going to affect this, and he said no. This is a federal project. These are federal grants, and apparently they're not being held up like some of the other federal grants are. In any event, it was an interesting procedure, and you guys do some good things when you go to MPO.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That completes my report.
Thank you. And we didn't have our MPO meeting yet. We'll have it next week. So nothing to report there. Tradco?
So
was there in March, but not this month because of other stuff, but Julie was.
I was there, and the conversation really was centered around the gas tax, talking about a lot of people don't understand that the county and the city receive a portion of the gas tax. So it's not just ODOT gets the entire amount. So
They get half.
they do get half. So 30% goes to the county, 20% goes to the city. And it is the money that they spend to improve your street network. And one of the other things that, I've pointed out on multiple occasions to people is they always go, well, I pay property taxes. That's how my streets are taken care of. And actually, can't use property tax for street improvements. So this is where they use the money, the gas tax money, to be able to do that. And so one of the things that we talked about at Tradco was making sure that as the visioning group gets together and they start looking at how do you fund transportation, freight, all of these different things, roads, maintenance, operations, transit, et cetera, that every single community makes sure that their voice is heard, and kind of encouraged our public works people to get involved. They need to be able to get on one of these subgroups, and so I volunteered them to the groups, which they were like at first really upset about, like, you did what? To thank you very much. Yes, I will participate. So I think that that's the piece, was really getting them to understand that if they don't educate their communities, the communities just make a random decision, not understanding the implication of it. So, no, Carl, I did not volunteer you. You're welcome. But I did volunteer somebody from the county, so. And from the city, but not you, so.
Okay.
But that's really what the conversation was about at Tradco. And that group is an advocacy group about transportation and transportation funding, so. More to come.
Thanks. I realized I didn't on the last meeting for the MPO, but I've slept since then, so I can't remember what we did. We will go on to RV Act, and Denise is on. There she is.
Yeah, okay. RV Act met on, my computer does that. I don't know why. I don't move the camera. I think AI has taken over my computer.
Oh, no.
I know. But I met on March 10th, and it started out with a presentation by ODOT about the ODOT maintenance report. And really the big takeaway from that was that, delaying maintenance costs a lot more. And they've had cost increases since 2017 have been more than double. So that's quite a bit. And that was in material costs, labor costs, and it's just now starting to stabilize. The costs are finally starting to stabilize. There was an OTC meeting update, and they talked about the legislative session and the shortfall of $242 million in 2025 to 2027. Talked about the 700 positions not filled and $1.9 million legislative approved budget, and the need to reduce services and positions. So let's see. The capital investment plan, the CIP, goes over 10 years from 2027 to 37. And so now the way it's going to work is that all projects will come from the CIP. It'll be updated annually. It used to be 3 years. Projects will be either programmed or planned, and the public comment period closed on March 31st. So at that meeting, then they were looking for approval for the top 5 projects, and the task force had gone through the list and made some recommendations. So the whole process is a whole lot more about prioritizing and really meeting the highest needs, and knowing that we have to defer things, and some things aren't going to make the list, and deferred maintenance may cost more, but that's just the option right now. So that's about it.
Thank you. All right. Anything for the good of the order? Nope. Then we'll be.
Small
Just wait,
thing
wait.
for good of the order.
Yes.
From the March 10th was also the date that Tradco met that I was able to attend. And the conversation was mostly about the meeting that was going to happen, where they were talking about the top 5 projects and deferred maintenance. And I reminded them all about the ballot measure. I think that was everything.
Awesome. All right. We'll be adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice.